Welcome back to the Culture Check in the Green. Let's talk about why the words from the president matters, especially when they're about history, fairness, and who gets to be treated with dignity. President Trump recently said that civil rights protections caused white people to be treated very badly. Now, whether you're a conservative, liberal, or just tired of the culture war, noise, and etc., this needs to be checked. And that's why this is called the Culture Check. Let's talk about why this claim is false and why it's harmful, and especially when it pertains to the minority communities. Now, in an interview published a few weeks ago, maybe last week, don't remember the exact timeline, President Trump criticized the civil rights law of the 1960s, including affirmative action, saying that led to what we call reverse discrimination, and that white people were very badly treated as a result. He suggested that civil rights protection policies intended to stop discrimination ended up unfairly excluding white people from college admissions and jobs. That's a big claim, y'all, and that deserves to be carefully scrutinized. Now, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to stay as respectful as possible, because that genuinely did bother me. For someone of his stature and in the place of power, that he had the audacity to say something of that nature, where he's never been a minority. By the looks of things, he never really had to struggle, and when he did have to struggle, he somehow gets bailed out. But let me not get off track, and let me stick to what we're here to talk about. But I'm going to talk about why this statement isn't just controversial, it's harmful. Because, one, it minimizes the real history of discrimination. Civil rights laws were enacted because Black, brown, indigenous, Asian, and other non-white people were legally barred from equal access to schooling, housing, voting, jobs, and basic dignity for generations. To say white people were very badly treated in this context obscures that reality and distorts the reason why these laws existed in the first place. 2, it erases ongoing inequality. The empirical evidence shows that the people of color still faces widespread disparities in wealth, health, education, and criminal justice outcomes. Not because of civil rights law, y'all, but often despite them. So, number 3, this statement, it frames equality as a danger. When leaders describe efforts to level the playing field as something that hurts one group, it sends the message that fairness is a threat, and that marginalized communities are somehow to blame for progress. And this rhetoric can fuel resentment, division, and policy decisions that roll back protections rather than extend them. Exactly what many civil rights advocates fear is going to happen under this current administration. Now, the claim that civil rights laws harmed white Americans doesn't hold up when we look at the data, and it sure doesn't hold up from history. Civil rights laws did not remove legal privileges white people had. They ended up legalized exclusion, which was not mutual exclusion, but even enforced and backed by courts and governments for centuries. Americans still hold the majority of the wealth, political power, and institutional influence, ownership, and educational access in the U.S. Civil rights laws did not reverse that. They did not eliminate it. Disparities in employment, income, incarceration, education, and health disproportionately impacts Black people, Latino people, indigenous people, and other communities of color. Outcomes that persist because of the systematic inequities, not because of civil rights protection. In other words, if I didn't understand that, ending discrimination doesn't translate into discrimination against the formerly dominant group. It means opportunities are no longer built on exclusion. Now, the term reverse discrimination gets tossed around, but here's the culture check. Discrimination is not just about who gets hurt. It's about history, power, and structural access. A policy that opens doors for people long denied entry is not the same as laws that kept them out. Treating those two things as equivalent misrepresents history and misunderstands why civil rights laws were needed in the first place. And when we call access harm, we lose track of what justice actually is. Now, this isn't abstract academic debate, y'all. It has real-world consequences. Civil rights enforcement officers are being weakened. DEI and equity programs are being dismantled, y'all. Voting rights protections remain under attack. Now, when leaders rewrite history to say justice hurt someone, it becomes easier to roll back protection and harder to hold systems accountable for continued inequity. So here's the culture check I'm going to tell y'all. Civil rights laws aim to stop discrimination. They did not create discrimination. Claiming that these laws hurt white people ignores the history of exclusion and the ongoing reality of disparities. Also, narrative matters, y'all. And when the president reframes equality as harm, it shifts public sympathy away from the people still struggling for genuine equity. Justice isn't a zero-sum game, y'all. Equality doesn't create losers. It corrects imbalances. History deserves honesty, y'all, not revision. Now, knowing how some people can be, I took the time to look up some claims and what they would say and how I would respond if this was a debate. Civil rights laws cause reverse discrimination against white people. So that claim, the statement that's normally with that is that white students lost college spots and jobs because of affirmative action. Let me clear something up. If you didn't know this, civil rights laws didn't remove opportunity. They removed exclusivity. For most of U.S. history, the access to schools, jobs, housing, and voting was legally restricted by race. Ending that system doesn't equal discrimination. It restores access. Equality feels like a loss only when someone was benefiting from an uneven system. Losing guaranteed advantage is not the same as being discriminated against. Now, claim 2. White people were treated very badly after the civil rights laws. This comes with the saying, white men became the only group you can discriminate against. This claim ignores the outcome and power. Because after the civil rights laws, y'all, white Americans still held, and still does, hold the most wealth. Still dominates leadership roles. Still benefits from legacy admissions, housing equity, and political power. Civil rights didn't reverse the hierarchy. They softened it slightly. If white men were treated badly, the data would show loss of power. It doesn't, y'all. Claim 3. Affirmative action proves the system is unfair now. And they would say admission should be colorblind. Colorblindness only works in a world that started equally. Affirmative action was designed to counter the segregated schools, the red line neighborhoods, the generational wealth gaps. And removing context does not create fairness. It hides inequality. You can't call a race fair if some runners start 50 yards behind. Claim 4. Civil rights are old news. Everyone's equal now. They always like to say, slavery and segregation are over. Move on. And this statement, it very frustrates me because laws can change faster than the outcome, y'all. We still see disparities in wealth accumulation, healthcare access, incarcerations, and school funding. Civil rights laws addressed legal barriers, not the long-term consequences of exclusion. Ending injustice doesn't erase its effects. Another claim. Talking about race divides people. This conversation right here causes resentment. You know what I would say to that? Ignore race doesn't heal division. It preserves misunderstanding. Division doesn't come from discussing inequality. It comes from denying it. Truth is uncomfortable, y'all. But silence benefits the status quo. And truth is, silence doesn't unite people. Honesty does. So, let's understand something. Civil rights laws, they didn't punish white people. They stopped legal exclusion. Equality is not oppression, and history shouldn't be rewritten to soothe discomfort. Justice isn't a zero-sum game, but misinformation makes it feel like this one. Now, of course, I'm always going to bring this up. As believers, we have to ask a deeper question than politics. What does God say about justice, fairness, and truth? Because I can assure you, Scripture is very clear. God does not confuse justice with oppression. The Bible tells us in Micah 6:8, what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. This isn't optional, y'all. And justice isn't favoritism. It's correction. Now, civil rights laws were designed to stop people from being denied dignity because of how God made them. That aligns directly with Scripture. Proverbs 31:8 and 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Defend the right of the poor and needy. Removing barriers for the oppressed is not harming the advantaged. It's obeying God. Now here's the heart check, y'all. When fairness feels like a loss, the Bible doesn't call that injustice. It causes pride. Jesus said in Matthew 20 in the parable of the workers, those who worked all day were angry when others received the same wage. But the landowner says, am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? Equality felt unfair only because they were used to more. Scripture repeatedly warns those in power not to confuse accountability with persecution. Luke 12:48 also says, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. Civil rights didn't punish white Americans. They called a powerful group to responsibility. Now that's biblical. The Bible never said blame the oppressed for progress. The Bible never calls justice reverse oppression. The Bible never asked to rewrite history to protect comfort. Instead, God consistently sides with truth even when it's uncomfortable. Isaiah 1:17. Learn to do right, seek justice, and defend the oppressed. So here's the faith-based culture check. Justice isn't an attack. Equality is not oppression. And telling the truth about history, honor God. It doesn't divide us. If fairness feels threatening, the problem isn't justice. It's the heart posture we bring to it. That's the culture check from a biblical sense. As always, I'd love to have this conversation. Comment below what your thoughts is. I even invite you on an episode that we can have a discussion face to face. I believe in having a conversation. I don't believe in silencing those who disagree with me. But when you do come to this conversation, think of what I said today, and let's make sure we are on the right side that God has called us to be. That's it for the Culture Check, guys, today. Peace and love.